Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Titletown Talk. I'm your host, Ian Ewing. Welcome to today's episode. We are going to talk about the swath of offensive linemen that fit the Packers' typical size and athletic thresholds. We'll kind of go over who they might actually take in this year's draft and different tiers that we have. I'm coming at you from Madison, Wisconsin on a gloomy day. I'm home alone with my dogs right now, so if you guys hear anything barking in the background, I apologize. There's also somebody moving in downstairs, so it's a little loud. So please don't judge any noises you might hear. Before we talk about the offensive lineman, I want to talk about the Packers signing of Mecole Hardman in free agency a few weeks ago. I don't know why I didn't touch on it on another episode. I got a message about it this week, and I figured I would go over it. He's just a value signing for the Packers. They didn't sign him to be the savior as in the wide receiver room, obviously. I don't even think that he's going to make the team necessarily. I think it's a good chance, but he signed a 1 year, $1.5 million deal. So this is not a guaranteed signing by any stretch of the imagination. He's a total upside play for the Packers as a wide receiver. He did show some potential. He was drafted in 2019 by the Chiefs in the second round from Georgia. He's kind of famous for running a 4.3 40-yard dash in the combine that year. You know, I think he was like 63 on the consensus board that year. Andy Reid, of course, saw a lot of potential in him, rightfully so. So they picked him in the second round. He was traded to the Jets in 2023, did not do a thing with the Jets, by the way. And then the Chiefs said, yeah, you know what, we'll try to sign him back. So they did in the 2024 offseason. His real upside, though, and the reason they made this signing is as a punt returner, guys. He did have a return touchdown last year. He's averaged almost 10 yards per punt return in his career, which is crazy. Certainly better than anyone the Packers have had. Even Keyshawn Nixon, he's more of a kick returner. Jaden Reed has not been a good punt returner. Just calling a spade here. Okay, some of you might see, he does wave for a fair catch a lot, and there's like a ton of room in front of him. He's got fairly reliable hands in that aspect, but so he's not Amari Rodgers, excuse me, where he's dropping 3 or 4 punt returns straight in 3 or 4 weeks straight a couple years ago, and that's ultimately why Amari Rodgers is no longer a Packer. Do I think he could actually produce as a wide receiver? I think if he's used in the correct way, he can be a sort of a useful piece, right? He had a PFF grade of 70 the last couple of seasons as a receiver. That's not bad. Again, PFF grade 60 is average, so 70 is a fairly above average grade. He doesn't drop a lot of passes. I think his use best would be as what Tyler Ervin did back in 2020 when they had that historically good offense. Excuse me. I think he can be really good at that. I saw a lot of people on Twitter say this about him being a deep threat for the Packers. He's absolutely never been a deep threat. His average depth of target was actually behind the line of scrimmage this last year. He's never been a deep threat despite having, that 4.3 speed. He does have that great speed, like I said, so that's definitely something we can use, especially in the return game. I think he, at best, will be the Packers' 6th receiver. I think that they're going to have a 5th receiver that they draft, and then there'll be a 7th that could make the team, maybe competing with him for the 6th as well. That being said, again, he was not drafted to save the room. I will say this, though. Again, I've said this in other episodes. If there's any group of people that we should trust on the Packers, it's the pro personnel team. Think about all the people they've picked up in free agency over the last few years, right? Guys like, Zadarius Smith, who was never a productive player for the Ravens, comes to the Packers that first year. He should have been an all-pro in 2020 or 2019, sorry. We saw what they did with Xavier McKinney this year, what Josh Jacobs did. They had a ton of success pulling Rasul Douglas off of a practice squad, right? Again, they've proven that we should be able to trust them with this type of stuff, that they know what they're doing, okay? So again, Mecole Hardman, love the signing, super cheap. He might not even make the team, but we'll see. Next thing really quick, guys, Mykel Williams out of Georgia. He's an edge player in the draft this year. He is on a top 30 visit with the Packers. So we talked a little bit about, the top 30 visits and them being a good sort of temp check on what the Packers are interested in, and the players who they pick in the draft often were top 30 visits, right? It's kind of hit or miss on if the top 30 visits indicate a first or second round pick. It seems like that's more for the later picks so far, but I digress. So Mykel Williams coming in, along with Shamar Stewart, who I love a lot more, by the way. Forget his name, from Tennessee, was there as well. God, his name's escaping me already. Doesn't matter. They're clearly interested in edge players. We kind of knew that coming in. I like Mykel Williams. He's probably like my third favorite edge in the draft. I do think there's a chance he's there at 23. So I think it's a good idea to bring him in. So we'll see what happens there. Like I said, today we're going to go over the offensive linemen. We're going to go over guards, tackles, and centers all in one episode. We're going to do it a little bit differently here because you guys know, I've said it before, I do not know what I'm looking at with offensive linemen. I don't want to just go and pull up their scouting reports and just read off the website. I already regret doing that on a few episodes already this draft cycle. So we're going to go kind of big picture today. We'll go over who the player is, where they went to school, their age, their RAS score, arm length, and then kind of just go from there. I'll start out by saying this. I don't think it's highly likely. I think it's less than a 40% chance that they'll pick a lineman in the first or second round. And the reason for that is because they picked Jordan Morgan last year. They signed Aaron Banks in free agency. They still have everybody under contract this year. I think next year is where we could see them go high again if they don't re-sign Rashid or Sean Ryan. That being said, I think we should all be prepared for the fact that they might pick a lineman in the first or second round, right? I mean, this is an interesting position. Like I said, we're going to go over all the linemen in detail, or in who they're from and all that today, not in great detail, but there were a ton of names on this list, right? We've done all the need positions so far. We've gone over a lot of names. Obviously, I'm going to make sure you guys have a full list of these people at the end. I think lineman has the most Packer fits out of any position group. That being said, I don't think they're going to be addressing it super early. So we'll see, right? Let's go over what they're looking for, okay? They like guys that have had at least a 7.5 RAS. They've had drafted a few guys that were less than that. There's a guy in 2020 named Simon Stepanek, however you say it. He was like supposedly a third-round pick, and then he tore his ACL. He never actually played for the Packers, but he didn't do any testing. We had Travis Glover last year, but they picked him up because he's a freak show at size. So his athleticism wasn't there, but they have Kadeem Telford. They had, I can't remember his name. Jones. I cannot remember his name. The big dude. Oh, it doesn't matter. You guys are like, get on with it, man. They have picked guys or drafted guys, signed guys who are really, really big that didn't necessarily fit the athletic profiles. So that's a possibility, but again, I'm trying to narrow the list down for you guys. The other thing they like to do is they like to draft tackles that play tackle in college, but then they like to switch them to guard in the NFL. You've seen this with Darren College back in the day, TJ Lang. We've seen it with Cole Van Lanen a few years ago. The Packers drafted him as a tackle, played him at guard. John Runyon Jr. is another example of that. There are a ton of guys over the years that were drafted as tackles that they moved to guard. So again, they like to do that. The other thing they look for, the player needs to be at least 6'3" in height. Now, I would say 6'4", but last year they picked Jacob Monk, who was 6'3". So I would say 6'4" is probably a better idea of who they're going to pick. They have to have at least 32-inch arms. They've never picked a guy with shorter arms than that. They've never picked a guy shorter than 6'3". So we'll kind of go off of that. So let's start with the tackles. We're going to go with a couple of first/second round guys who I think that they could entertain in the second round. I do not think these guys will be first-round players. The first guy is Josh Connerly out of Oregon. Goody was at the Oregon Pro Day with John Eric Sullivan, their player personnel guy. He's an interesting player. He is 6'4", 311. His arm length is 33.5, so he's got good arm length. His RAS is 8.96. He's 36 on the consensus board. So do I think they would put him in the first-round conversation? No. But if he's there in the second, I think that would make sense. So that's Josh Connerly. The next guy is a lot better of a fit. His name is Ariante Ursary. He went to Minnesota. Grab onto something when I give you guys his measurables. He is 6'6", 331 pounds. Wow. 33-inch arms. His RAS is 9.37. He's currently 42 on the consensus board. I would do Ursary in the second round for sure. That is a hell of a profile. 6'6", 331, 937 RAS. That's, again, 10 is a perfect RAS. 9.37 is really, really good. So that is Ariante Ursary from Minnesota. Again, if he's there in the second, I'd be really surprised if the Packers didn't give that a hard look. Will he be there in the second? I highly doubt it. Next guy, bear with me on the pronunciation. His name is Jonah Savianaya from Arizona. He is 6'4". I don't know why I don't have his weight here. He has 33-inch arms. His RAS is 9.15. He's 55 in the consensus board. We're getting a little bit warmer now on the consensus board of where the Packers might pick their first lineman. He's a little on the shorter side, so he's a guy who I think maybe if he's there in the third, they might entertain moving Jonah to guard and not playing him at tackle, but an interesting player nevertheless. The next guy, now we get into the like real good fits for the Packers. This is a 94 in the consensus board player, so usually that means third, fourth round. His name is Anthony Belton out of NC State. Okay? He is 6'6", 336 pounds, so this dude is massive. He has an RAS of 8.14, so not crazy athletic, but again, massive player. 94 in the consensus board, third, fourth round. I would be more than happy if they entertained him at that position. The next guy, though, is a slightly better fit. Grab onto something again. Ozzie Trapillo from Boston College. He is 6'8", 316 pounds. And by the way, this is the combine measurements. This isn't like, hey, I'm going to report this to the NFL teams but I'm really like 6'6". He was measured at 6'8", 316 pounds. He has 33-inch arms, 8.85 RAS. He's 105 in the consensus board. If they picked him in the third, guys, I would be more than okay with that. So he's the first like tier one. Hey, remember his name, Ozzie Trapillo. Maybe it's Trapillo. I don't know how to pronounce his name, but this dude is a freak, an absolute freak show. Great fit. He's a tier one athlete, same body type they look for. And again, this is right when they'd start looking at tackles, the third, fourth round. Next guy, he is a little undersized, but he's another one who I could see, tackle turn to guard. His name is Caleb Rogers. He went to Texas Tech. He's 6'4", 312 pounds. So a little bit undersized. I think he would move to guard. So if they do pick him in the fourth, fifth round, which is his projection, I'd be more than happy with that if they moved him to guard. 32-inch arms. He's 142 on the consensus board. So again, that fourth, fifth round range. Perfect 9 RAS. Out of all the guys I've listed so far, he's probably the least likely. But again, definitely a guy. Another tier one fit here. Again, grab onto something for the 8th time. Jalen Travis out of Iowa State. If there was one guy in this group that I would say sirens going off for the tackles, it's Jalen Travis. He is 6'7", 339 pounds, 9.91 RAS, 34-inch arms. The dude is a freak. He's 153 on the consensus board, just a massive dude. He actually had the best RAS out of all the tackles. So again, 153 on the consensus board means he's a third, fourth, fifth round pick probably. And if the Packers picked him in the fourth round, I would be ecstatic over it. Another guy I absolutely love. Ozzie Trapillo, Jalen Travis are the two guys so far who, again, the lights are going off for these guys. He had a 98th percentile vert. Get this one. He had a vertical jump of 35 inches at 6'7", 339 pounds. That is insane, guys. He had a 9.4 broad jump, which is in the 92nd percentile. So again, just a freak athlete. Jalen Travis, Iowa State. Next guy, also tier one fit, Logan Brown from Kansas. He's 6'6", 311. He has 33-inch arms, so solid. 9.46 RAS. He is 165 on the consensus board. So he's another guy who I think, he's in that fourth, fifth, sixth round range. But again, a guy who I would really be happy if they picked. That's a really good frame to build on. I guarantee you guys that he'll be high on the Packers board. The last tackle of the viable options is a guy named Carson Vinson. He went to Alabama A&M, so small school. 6'7", 314. The longest arms of the bunch, 34.5-inch arms. So he has got some major pythons for arms. 9.44 RAS. He's 205 in the consensus board. So again, 5th, 6th round, 7th round guy. But again, really, really good fit for the Packers. That's all the tackles. So out of all those guys, we got, as far as tier one fits, we have Anthony Belton-ish, is 8.14 RAS, a little on the low end. Ozzie Trapillo, Jalen Travis, Logan Brown, Carson Vincent. All those guys I'd be more than happy with. Next guy, first guy at guard, Tate Ratledge out of Georgia. So Goody's favorite school, Green Bay Junior, Georgia. We even have the same logo. He is going to be high on the Packers board. I will guarantee you guys that. And I would be very happy if he was the third round pick for the Packers. I think they need guards more than they need tackles personally. Your mileage may vary on that. Again, they draft tackles who play guard. They like versatile guys. I think Tate Ratledge has plenty of length to play tackle. I don't think he played tackle in college, but again, he can play college in my opinion. 32-inch arms, that's about as low as they go there. He ran a 4.97 40. He had a 1.72 split, which is in the 95th percentile. So his speed scores are off the charts. He had a 96th percentile broad jump. The Packers are probably going to have a second round grade on him. His RAS was 9.96. Wow. He's 68 in the consensus board. He's probably my favorite guard by far. He's also somebody who's been showing up on every mock draft in the third for the Packers. So I love him as a player. I think he's a great fit. They draft him in the third round. They pick an edge or receiver in the first round, second round, maybe defensive tackle or corner in the second round. And then they pick a lineman in the third. That's as early as I would be happy that they would take one, but I would not be surprised if it was sooner. Next guy, Jackson Slater out of Sacramento State, 6'3", 311, so a little on the shorter side, 32-inch arms, but a 9.35 RAS. He's 125 on the consensus board. He's a little bit lower on the PFF board. His 32-inch arms and his size make him kind of a... I would be surprised if the Packers picked him, but again, his RAS 9.35 is really good. Might be a 5th, 6th round guy, but that's Jackson Slater, Sac State. Miles Frazier out of Louisiana State, another really, really good fit at guard. 6'5", 317, 32-inch arms. So again, that's why he's a guard. 9.58 RAS, so really, really athletic guard. He is 130 on the consensus board. I mentioned that Slater was higher on the consensus board at 125, but Miles Frazier is going to be higher on the Packers board. I'll just tell you that. Next guy, also a really, really good fit for the Packers. 5th round guy, Connor Colby out of Iowa. So he's an Iowa Hawkeye. 6'5", 309, 32-inch arms on the dot, but a 9.67 RAS. So again, love this guy, Connor Colby. He's 155 on the consensus board. So again, he's a 5th, 6th round guy, but again, that's where I think they'll probably look to add. Clay Webb out of Jacksonville State is another guy, 6'3", 312, so a little on the short side. 32-inch arms on the dot, 9.18 RAS, 175 in consensus. So he's borderline size, but again, we're talking later in the draft. That's when the Packers tend to bend their thresholds a little bit if they like the player. I guess we'll find out if they like the player or not, right? Last guy at guard, Joe Huber, out of our Wisconsin Badgers. He is 6'5", 310, 32.2-inch arms, 8.92 RAS, 297 on the consensus board. So he's technically on the consensus board. He's an undrafted guy. Again, he is the kind of guy who they would take a UDFA flyer. Similar to Donovan Jennings last year, who I really liked. They gave Donovan Jennings a ton of money. So if he's still there in the UDFA market, I wouldn't be surprised. I could see them liking him enough to pick him in the 6th, 7th round too, right? So that's Joe Huber out of Wisconsin. The last position group is probably, if you guys had a gun to my head, I hope you never do, Jared Wilson out of Georgia is probably the second most likely player out of this group at center. He is a guy, again, Georgia, Packers love Georgia players. I think center's probably the most likely, most needy position in the draft, but there's only a few guys that meet their criteria. I'm going to give you guys 3 names. First one, like I said, Jared Wilson out of Georgia. He has a 9.86 RAS, so he's number 1 with all the centers. I think center's a sneaky need. So Elton Jenkins is a free agent in 2 years, I believe. They're drafting players that will be here for 4 years. So you could see at some point they're going to need to draft a center. I don't think they have anyone on their roster they feel super comfortable with. I think Jacob Monk is a potential guy, but I don't think that it's a foregone conclusion that he's going to develop, despite the fact that I liked him coming out. So that's Jared Wilson out of Georgia. He's 78 in the consensus board. We'll see if the Packers would take a flyer on him early. I don't think they'd use a second-round pick on him, but I could see maybe a third-round pick. We'll see. Next guy, Joshua Gray out of Oregon State. He's 6'5", 300 pounds, so he's definitely big enough in that aspect, but only 31 and a third inch arms. So he's probably a little bit too small, but hey, maybe he is a 7th round guy. If there's ever a position that the arm length isn't that big of a deal, it's probably center. He had an 8.85 RAS, 172 in the consensus board. The last draftable center is Drew Kendall out of Boston College. I'm wondering if Hafley knows about him. If he does, I could see this maybe being a more likely choice. But Drew Kendall is 6'4", 308, 31.7-inch arms, so kind of close there, right? But his RAS is 9.11, so solid athlete. 297 in the consensus board. So again, maybe a late round undrafted guy. So that means, guys, that there are only 3 centers that actually make sense to draft. So like I said, it's probably the most likely position that I should keep saying the most likely. It's probably the biggest need on the offensive line. But maybe they see one of those guards that we went over having the ability to play center. That's possible. They've also talked about Zach Tom being a Hall of Fame caliber center, even though I think they're going to pay him as a tackle, obviously. If I were him, I would want him to pay him as a tackle, right? So, we'll see with center. I think there's a dark side candidate in the first round named Gray Zabel. I don't know anything about linemen, like I said, but a lot of people I respect think that he is going to be way underdrafted. He could slide to like the 30s in the draft, but he might end up being like the best lineman in this draft. He's coming from a really small school, which is why he's not being thought of as a top 5 or 10 guy. He's very versatile. He can play up and down the line. He can play tackle, guard, or center. Gray Zabel is somebody who in the first round, if all the other guys are gone, I wouldn't be shocked if they considered him there. I didn't do any scouting on him, but just look out for that name, Gray Zabel. A couple other guys here that are at center, really, really low, not even on the consensus board. Eli Cox out of Kentucky. He has the highest RAS of all the centers, 9.88. But again, very low on the consensus. The last guy, Joe Mikulski, Oklahoma State, 8.91 RAS. He's in the 500s on the consensus board. So, again, these guys could be there. They're certainly going to be athletic enough. They definitely meet the size thresholds, but we'll see. So I ranked a top 10 list for you guys of all the linemen. In the number 1 is like the most likely guy all the way down to the least likely. The number 1 most likely guy, in my opinion, is Tate Ratledge, guard. I think he has Packer written all over him. Second round, I'd be okay with it. Third round, I'd be really happy with it. Next guy, Jalen Travis. He's a tackle. 4th, 5th round. Carson Vincent. We talked about all these guys, right? 5th, 6th round guy. Ozzie Trapillo, tackle. 3rd, 4th round guy. Second guard, Connor Colby. 6, Miles Frazier. 7, Jared Wilson, the center. 8, Joshua Connerly, the guard. Number 9, Logan Brown, the tackle. And number 10, Ariante Ursary out of Minnesota, a tackle. So that is my top 10 list. That's the most likely Packers in this draft that play at offensive line. Now, again, I mentioned before at the beginning, right? I'll kind of close on this. We all think that they should draft a wide receiver, a pass rusher. I think those still are the biggest needs by far. We all know linemen are not sexy. Some of my listeners, potentially, I have friends I know that get triggered when I say that about linemen. Offensive line, as we saw with the Eagles in the Chiefs Super Bowl, is very, very important. Not having a good offensive line, the Chiefs, for example, they completely lost the game. Having an offensive line like the Eagles gives, Jalen Hurts 4 years to pass behind the line of scrimmage, right? That's also how you turn Saquon Barkley into a, all-world running back, right? So no one will dispute the fact that offensive line is very important. Is it more important than edge, wide receiver, defensive tackle? No, it's not. Cornerback? No. It's probably the 4th, I would say 5th most biggest need on the team, which is why this is our 5th episode of the draft preview, by the way. But there are a lot of guys who meet their thresholds. A lot. I went through 10 there. There are actually more coming in after pro days. I'm not going to redo the episode as pro days come in, but there are more and more guys who are starting to fall into that range. So it's entirely possible they come out of this draft with 3 linemen. And I think we all need to be prepared, I'll close on this, for the Packers to take a lineman in the 1st or 2nd round. I mentioned a couple guys who I'd be totally fine with in the 2nd round. If they picked a lineman in the 1st, I would be disappointed, with one caveat. If they have value players at edge, wide receiver, and cornerback and defensive tackle, the 4 positions there, if they have value there and they pick the tackle or the guard or the center, that's where I'm going to be a little upset. But if all the guys go that make sense for them and the best player on the board is Kelvin Banks Jr. out of Texas or Gray Zabel, I would have zero issue with that. There's another guy, I think his name's Joshua Simmons. I think he's a tackle for Ohio State. I didn't go over him either, but he has Packer written all over him too. I don't think he did any testing. But like I said, guys, I think guard is a really sneaky need, especially if Jordan Morgan's going to play left tackle next year. I don't know if they're going to re-sign Sean Ryan. We'll see, right? We'll see. I just want you guys to be prepared, as am I, that they might be interested in a lot of linemen in this draft. So if you have a receiver you really like on the board, as long as it's not Jaden Higgins, because I still love him the most, and you pick a guard or a tackle or a center, we just have to roll with it, right? And the Packers have made wine out of water many, many times with offensive linemen. I mentioned the different players they've drafted over the years in the late rounds that have been good. Let's not forget David Bakhtiari was a 4th-round pick. Elton Jenkins was a 2nd-round pick. He's great. But there are tons of players. Chad Clifton, a bunch of players who they got late in the draft that were really, really good. Next week's episode, we're going to go through tight ends, running backs, safeties. Before that, I'm going to do a linebacker episode this week. So linebacker is probably need number 6 on the team. Tight end, running back, and safety are the least most likely and the least needy positions on the whole team. So I'm going to do kind of a fast hit list of all of those guys, favorites, best fits. We'll do a little bit of a scouting report on a few of the guys, right? Nothing crazy, though. We're not going to do a quarterback episode because I don't really think they're going to pick one high. If they do, yeehaw. But I don't really know what I'm looking at with quarterbacks either outside of the top guys. So I'm not going to do a whole episode on that. We're going to do a live mock draft for an episode where I record myself sharing my screen, and we'll do a couple of simulators to see what's there and different options they could explore in each round. I'm excited for that. I'm also going to redo the edge and receiver episodes a little bit. Not going to do like a full scouting report on guys unless it's somebody new added to the list, but there are a few guys in the receiver room specifically who now meet the Packers thresholds that did not before, now that we have pro day numbers. Emeka Egbuka, I'm putting him in there early as a fit. His RAS was 9.67. So he became even more of a realistic option after we got his pro day testing. So the same thing with edge. Savion Jones from LSU has testing now. There are a few other guys that have testing. Donovan Izaraku, Princely Emilion, I don't know how to say his name. He's another guy. There are a few guys who fit the Packers' needs now. Jordan Birch, who I talked about or didn't talk about that we need to talk about some more. So we'll do that as well. I hope you guys have a great week. Look for that linebacker episode on Tuesday or Wednesday. And as always, thank you for listening. Download the podcast, tell your friends, tell your family, leave a review. Let me know what you think. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Go Pack, go.